effective communication in relationships, whether that relationship is, you're just dating, whether you've been married for years and years. This is a topic that I'm very passionate about, and I'm really happy to have such a large attendance and be able to provide these tools and tips for you guys. So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Jeanette Dove. I'm a licensed clinician at Edens Counseling. I work closely with individuals who struggle with anxiety, depression, shame, and difficult negative thoughts. I also work closely with couples. I enjoy doing premarital counseling as well as couples and marriage counseling. Depending on your needs, I might pull a little bit from cognitive behavior therapy or attachment theory or solutions-focused therapy. And when I'm doing my couple sessions, I draw heavily from the Gottman model. And I'll be talking quite a bit about Dr. John Gottman today during our session as well. Before I begin, I just want to mention that everyone is muted. I'm going to ask that you stay muted for our time together. There is a chat and a comment section where you can type in questions if you have them. So I'll probably speak for about 40 minutes or so, and then I'm going to leave some time at the end to answer any questions that may pop up throughout the session. You do not have to wait to the end to type in your questions. So please feel free to type them in as you have them, as they come to you. And I will get to those probably in our last 15 to 20 minutes. As you're joining, I want to make sure that you know that this session is being recorded. So I want you to protect your privacy. You do not have to show yourself. So feel free to stop your video. We do post these sessions for the community. So I just want you to be mindful of that. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Here we go. So I'm really, really excited to be here to present on this topic of developing effective strategies for communicating in your relationship. One thing I enjoy most about working with couples is helping them develop a culture of healthy communication in their relationship. So every strategy that I'm going to present to you today will be based on evidence-based research, which I think is extremely important. But before we dive into those strategies, I would like to start off by presenting some research that informs the purpose for today's presentation and why it's critical to develop communication habits that are intentional and effective and sustain the life of your relationship. All right, and so with that, I'm going to start with the ugly truth. All right. So this is a well-known statistic. It's all over. If you research marriage, divorce rates in our society, you're going to see this number pop up. And I think it's worth starting our webinar with. So the APA, the American Psychology Association, confirms that, while in Western cultures, over 90% of people marry or desire to be married, between 40 to 50% of those marriages in the United States specifically end in divorce. With such a high desire for marriage, it's interesting that the statistic for divorce is so high as well, right? So that begs the question, why? So according to some more research that I did, the most common reasons that were reported for divorce, and these are in no particular order, were financial reasons, money, lack of intimacy. Some couples reported that they married way too young, infidelity, lack of commitment. A lot of couples listed irreconcilable differences as the reason for divorce, and that can mean anything between a difference in values and difference in belief systems, a conflict that just could not be resolved. And then, of course, communication. Of all of the articles that are researched, of all the lists that I looked at for reasons for divorce, communication was at least in the top 3 or top 5 of those lists. So for our remaining time together, I'm going to share a few evidence-based strategies for creating a culture of healthy communication in your relationship. And I love that phrase, a culture of healthy communication. I think that's very important to develop. When I work with couples, whether it be for premarital work or couples therapy, I usually spend a handful of our sessions focusing on communication. I find that the core of most issues, including whether it be money or intimacy, at the core of most of these issues is truly an inability to communicate, an inability to communicate our true feelings and emotions in a healthy way regarding that concern. We kind of struggle with communicating those problems in a way that promotes healthy dialogue, as opposed to reinforcing habits that stifle communication. So during my sessions, I'm going to pull heavily from the work of Dr. John Gottman, who is a well-known researcher and psychologist in the field of marriage therapy. Dr. Gottman is most known for his famous study. He did a long-term research study, which included observing the interactions of over 700 couples. Gottman, during this observation, discovered certain factors that distinguished happy and stable couples from both unstable and couples that had ultimately divorced and were unhappy. So throughout this study, he was also able to develop a method that allowed him to predict with over 90% accuracy, which of these couples would divorce and which ones would remain married. That you'll notice that I pull a lot from his research. I think it's really evidence-based and very sound techniques. As we're going through this, I just want to let you know that we will be following up with some resources that kind of highlight the main core concepts that I'm going to be going over today. So I don't want you to feel like you have to take detailed notes. I'm going to make sure that you walk away, probably by tomorrow evening, you walk away with the resources that you need to kind of reinforce and help you remember some of these strategies, okay? So one of the core pieces of Dr. Gottman's work is the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So this is a metaphor that depicts the end of times that's illustrated in the New Testament. Dr. Gottman uses this metaphor to describe communication styles, 4 communication styles that, according to his research, can predict the end of a relationship. So those 4 communication styles, the 4 horsemen, are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. So I'm going to take some time now to dive deeper into each of these 4 horsemen. I'm going to provide examples as well as a context for strategies that allow us to avoid creating a culture of communication in our marriage that's based on these negative communication styles. As I'm reviewing each of these styles of communication, I want you to kind of personally keep track of which ones you can identify with in your relationship, or maybe some of your past relationships, or maybe some that you've noticed from your partner. So to kind of keep track of those, and we'll talk about that after we go over the 4 horsemen. All right, so let's dive deeper into these. All right, so let's start with criticism. When you criticize your partner, in this style of communication, you are verbally attacking their personality or character. Oftentimes, criticism gets confused with voicing a complaint or offering a critique. So when you voice a complaint or a concern, you're doing it in a way that addresses a specific issue. Whereas when you're criticizing someone, you're attacking your partner at the core of their character. All right. So to kind of give us an example of that, here in this sentence, this quote, "You never think about me, or you never think about how your behavior is affecting other people. I don't believe you are that forgetful. You're just selfish. You never think about others. You never think of me." All right. So that's very critical. There's a lot of criticism in there. That's kind of attacking the person, their character. Whereas when you're just stating the complaint or concern, I was scared when you were running late and you didn't call me. I thought we had agreed that we would do that for each other, right? So more so addressing the concern, the issue at hand, rather than attacking the person's character or personality, okay? So that's criticism. And then we have contempt. When we communicate in this style, we are being truly mean, we're being truly disrespectful, we're mocking our partner, we're ridiculing them, we're name calling, our body language is off-putting, we're talking in a way that just really kind of shows disgust. The target of your contempt, your partner, is made to feel worthless. Contempt goes way far beyond criticism. While criticism attacks your partner's character, contempt assumes almost like a position of superiority over them. You're talking down on them, almost like they're beneath you. Contempt is usually fueled and festered by negative thoughts that you're having about your partner. You have these repetitive negative energy and thoughts about them, and it usually comes to head when your partner and you get into some type of disagreement. It's very important to note that contempt, Dr. Gottman from his research has identified contempt as the single greatest predictor of divorce. Okay, and here I gave you an example of what a statement of contempt sounds like. If you read that, you kind of notice that statement: pathetic, worthless child, idiotic video games, I don't have time to deal with you or deal with another kid. Just really kind of negative energy, negative talking down, bad name calling, making your partner really feel worthless. Okay. And then we have defensiveness. And defensiveness is typically a response to criticism, and we've all been defensive. And in my personal and professional opinion, this style of communication is the one that's most innate and most common. When we feel unjustly accused, it's natural to want to defend yourself and stick up for yourself and defend your honor. However, when it's done in a way that is unproductive, it can appear that we are fishing for excuses. It can kind of come off as that we're trying to be the victim or play the victim, and kind of place blame back on our partner. Unfortunately, this style of communication is never successful, almost never successful. Sometimes our excuses will come off as making our partner feel as if we don't want to take responsibility or own up to our mistakes. And although it's perfectly understandable to defend yourself if you're stressed out or if you're feeling attacked, but it typically won't end. The argument will just become escalated. It will escalate the conflict. And usually when we're engaging in that type of conflict with our partner, we want to develop strategies that will de-escalate the conflict. Okay, so that's defensiveness. And once again, if you're having any questions about these, feel free to type them in the chat, and I'll make sure I'll get to them before we end our time together. Here is an example of defensiveness. So did you call Jim and Susie to let them know that we're not coming tonight as you promised? And then that defensive response is, so the person kind of perceived that as like a negative attack against them, kind of got defensive there and saying, no, I was too busy. As a matter of fact, you already know how busy I am. And I've been booked all week. Why didn't you just do it? Kind of deflecting the energy, putting it back on their partner, kind of making excuses and not really owning up to their part in that. Okay. And then stonewalling is the fourth horseman, which is usually a response to contempt. Okay, so stonewalling occurs when your partner withdraws, when you or your partner withdraw. And usually this is due to an overwhelming and unmanageable amount of emotions that arise within yourself. And so during that interaction, whether your partner is being contemptuous or whatnot, you just have a surge of emotions that can become unmanageable. So you shut down and you stop responding, or your partner shuts down and stops responding. And rather than confronting the issue, people who stonewall will, make evasive maneuvers to get out of the conversation, whether it be just completely going silent, turning away, acting busy, engaging in something that's distracting from that conversation. And once again, that is just a response to the emotions, not being able to manage the emotions that are coming up during that escalation. Okay. So I asked you to kind of tally up how many of those 4 horsemen you notice, either in your current relationship and past relationships, whether it be you or your partner who's engaging in those styles. And so the idea is that just because you engage in these communication styles, it doesn't mean that your marriage or your relationship is immediately doomed. However, and I always stress this with great importance in my sessions with my couples, that those who engage in these styles without awareness and without motivation or willingness to change, you might run into some concerns. So we want to make sure that now that we're kind of aware of these horsemen and we're aware of these negative styles of communication, that we are proactive about it, right? Where we make intentional efforts to reverse those styles. And the good news is that for every horseman, there is an antidote that you can learn how to use when you are in these type of escalations with your partner. All right. And this is one of the resources that I'm going to make sure gets to you after our session, so you don't have to worry about writing all of this down. So as I explained before, each horseman has an antidote. And so we're going to start with criticism. As I mentioned, criticism is verbally attacking your partner's personality or character. And the antidote for criticism is to complain without blame by using the gentle startup approach. So it's okay to complain. It's okay to voice your concern. It's okay to have an opinion. But we want to do so in a way that is productive and is not targeting our partner. All right. So let's avoid saying you, which can indicate blame. And instead of talking about your partner, I would, maybe use I statements to express what you feel and what you're needing. So when you're using the gentle startup approach, you're making sure that you're talking about yourself as opposed to your partner. What do I feel? What do I need? So instead of starting off by telling your partner what you think they're doing wrong, start off with the I statements. I feel, or I'm making up, or I believe that, etc. So starting with the I statements helps soften your concerns and helps to prevent your partner from becoming guarded or ready to engage in an argument. Okay. So moving to contempt, the antidote to contempt is to build a culture of appreciation. And so this might be very hard to do if you're already feeling pretty contemptuous about your partner. But there's a few ways that we can do that. One of Gottman's mottos is small things often. So if you regularly express appreciation and gratitude and affection and respect for your partner, you'll create this positive energy and positive perspective in your relationship that will act as a buffer for those negative feelings when they do arise. So Gottman believes that your relationship at any moment is in one of two states. It's either in a positive perspective or it's either in a negative perspective. And the more positive you feel and express those feelings, the less likely you will feel or express contempt. And the opposite, right? So I'm constantly, if I'm constantly stating negative things to my partner, our relationship is going to stay in a state of negative energy. However, if we work hard to create a culture of positivity by expressing our love, expressing our gratitude for each other without being prompted or asked to do so, that can really kind of redirect the two of you guys are feeling about each other. So another way to explain this is the 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative interactions that a relationship can have to succeed. If you have 5 or more positive interactions for every 1 negative interaction, then you're making really solid, positive emotional, you're really depositing that emotional energy into your relationship, which keeps, your relationship positive and healthy. Okay, we're going to move on to the last 2. So defensiveness is described as victimizing yourself to ward off a perceived attack and reverse the blame. And the antidote to this is accepting your partner's perspective and offering an apology for any wrongdoing. So this is easier said than done, because once again, when we feel criticized, when we feel like our personality or character is being attacked, we want to stand up and defend our honor. Usually though, it's ego that gets in the way of partners being able to take responsibility. We are too caught up in being who's right or who's wrong, as opposed to owning our part in a disagreement. So a lot of work I like to do with my couples is breaking down those barriers, breaking down those ego barriers, just so we can really see each other. I'm going to answer that. I'm going to answer that. Great question. And then the next one we have is stonewalling. Stonewalling is when someone completely withdraws from a conflict, shuts down, whether that be walking away or distracting themselves, etc. This usually happens when you're feeling flooded or emotional or overwhelmed. So your reaction is to shut down, to stop and disengage. So the antidote to this is to do some self-soothing, right? This is one of the strategies I like to encourage my couples to do is take a break. If you feel your heart rate beginning to rise, if you feel your muscles beginning to tense up during a conversation, it's okay to say, time out. Or maybe you guys come up with a key or code word that you can throw out when you just need to take a break. The key though is if you take that break, you have to come back to the topic. It's not okay to take the break and never revisit it. All right. So I don't recommend taking a break and never coming back to that concern, because usually that leads to sweeping matters under the rug. And the more we sweep under the rug, the more resentment we build up for each other. And then, that always will come to a head at some point. I really want to answer this question now. I know I said I was going to take them at the last 20 minutes, but I want to go ahead and answer this now. So there's a question in the chat. What if your partner's contemptuous with you? Will showing appreciation for him help redirect his contempt eventually? It will, hopefully, but he also needs to be aware that he is doing that. He needs to be aware that that behavior is causing, is hindering y'all's relationship and hindering y'all's communication with each other. I always say relationships are a two-way street. It's never one person, and except in extreme, cases of abuse or addiction, etc. But usually it's, in most cases, it takes two to tango. So the first step is awareness. If we are not aware that, we're engaging in these 4 communication styles, then we don't have the ability to bring attention to it. We don't have the ability to redirect it. So I would encourage you in some way, and maybe through counseling sessions, we can have a safe space to kind of bring awareness to that contemptuous behavior. All right, so in summary, those 4 strategies are, criticism, contempt, Stonewalling and Defensiveness. And then we have those antidotes we just went over that you can use to combat that unhealthy communication patterns in your relationship. If this is something that you feel like, you know, you don't really feel like you can take this and just apply it because you feel like maybe your partner doesn't have that awareness, that is when I really encourage you to, you know, try to get your partner into a safe space, into a counseling session where we can explore that and unpack that. So we can really have some productive conversations about those communication styles within our relationship. If you enjoy reading, I want to encourage you to take a look at Dr. Godwin's book, The 7 Principles for Making a Marriage Work. In this book, Godwin will go into more detail about some of the key concepts I just went over, the 4 horsemen, the antidotes, as well as the concept of having a positive perspective or a negative perspective in your relationship, and what that looks like, and the key tips to kind of navigate through if you do have that negative energy, negative perspective, is if that's dominating your relationship. It's a good read. It's an easy read, very simple. So find it on Amazon. Okay, so I'm so happy I have time for this. I didn't think I was, but in addition to the Gottman techniques, another research-based strategy that I love to use with my couples when I'm helping them create a culture of healthy dialogue in their relationship is the Imago Dialogue. So this was developed by Dr. Hendricks and Dr. Hunt in 1980. Imago relationship therapy is a form of relationship and couples therapy that focuses on relational counseling to transform any conflict between couples into opportunities for healing and growth. Okay. So the word imago is a Latin word meaning image, and it refers to the unconscious image of familiar love. What we find is that there's a frequently connection between frustrations in adult relationships and early childhood experiences. Those are always in some way linked together. All right, so as an example, individuals who are frequently criticized as a child will likely be highly sensitive to any of their partner's criticism. All right, so when these core issues repeatedly come up with our partner, they can overshadow all the good in our relationship and leave us wondering whether we chose the right person, whether this is the relationship that I want to stay in. What I really love about the Imago Dialogue is that it cuts through everything else. It's not about a loaf of bread. It's not about you forgot to put gas in the tank. It's not about you left your shoes out on the couch, or you forgot to walk the dog. It's really not about those things. It's about the emotions underneath. And when we cut through all of that and have a conversation about really what this is representing and really what this is meaning for us, then we're being more productive. And those messages are a lot easier to hear from each other. And those 4 horsemen are usually a lot less likely to present themselves within that dialogue. All right. So in the Imago Dialogue, both parties have to agree to a basic ground rule. That is, one person is to talk at a time. This means in every conversation, there is a person who is speaking or sending a message, and another person who is listening or receiving the message. And each role requires a different set of skills and strategies that, when done intentionally and with fidelity, can promote healthy and productive dialogue. Now, the keys to this is that you're not going to get it right on the first attempt. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of intention. It takes a lot of goodwill and a lot of assuming goodwill in your partner to really get this. And what you're really doing is you're developing new habits in your relationship. Right? And it takes time to develop new habits. So don't think that this is something, because it's going to seem awkward at first. Talking in this way is going to feel very uncomfortable. You're going to feel very vulnerable. But the idea is that with time and the more you practice it and the more you try it with fidelity, the more it becomes ingrained in your relationship. Okay. So we're going to start with the sender. And so the document that you see on the right-hand side of your screen, that's going to be sent to you in a follow-up in email. So I don't want you to feel like you got to write all that down. And this is an actual document that I give to my couples. There's a sender document and there's a receiver document, which is here. And I'm going to go over that in just a second. And I literally tell my couples, keep this in your hand, put it on the refrigerator. And when you want to have a conversation, pull these out and use them to guide yourself. Once again, it's uncomfortable, it's weird, it's awkward in the beginning, but what you're doing is you are developing new behaviors. When you're developing a new culture in your marriage. So that's gonna take some time. So be compassionate with yourselves as you're learning this too. Okay, so first step in engaging in a critical conversation or engaging in any type of communication that you know could possibly escalate into an argument is to request an appointment. It's important to invite your partner to dialogue. All right, so now this may seem very strange, but imagine, if you will, spending over 8 hours at work and maybe another hour stuck in traffic on the way home. You're exhausted. You're burnt out. You barely have enough energy to get out of the car. Imagine walking through your front door and being bombarded with questions and concerns from your spouse, right? Chances are you're not going to be in the proper frame of mind to engage in those intense type of conversations. So this is why it's important to request an appointment with our partners. The first step is asking, is this a good time for us to talk? I have something important that I would like to share with you. Is this a good time? If your partner says no, you want to respect their answer and then ask them to let you know, well, when is a good time? Maybe in the next 24 hours. You know, when would you be willing to have this type of dialogue? All right. It's important to indicate who will establish coming back to it, like who is going to be the one to bring it back up. If, you know, we say, let's talk about this tomorrow. All right. So that way someone will actually take lead and the conversation doesn't just get brushed under the rug. All right. So once we invite our partner to communication or invite our partner to dialogue, you always want to make sure you are, you know, we're not doing this while one person's cooking and the other person is vacuuming, or while one person's in the shower and the other person's doing their makeup. We're doing this when we are, you know, we're sitting down, we're looking at each other, we're face to face, we're giving each other attention, we're giving each other respect. You know, we're creating a space of respect and creating an environment that feels comfortable to communicate in. All right. So the next step is to state your intentions. You know, begin with the introductory statement that helps your partner feel safe about what and how you're going to share. I want you to know that I'm sharing this with you because I care about a relationship, or I want the outcome of this for us to both feel like we get something out of this, right? So make sure you're pausing periodically so that your partner has a chance to kind of take this in. You want to stay focused. You want to avoid rambling or going down side roads. Stick to the topic and make sure that you stay on one topic per dialogue. All right. So we're not going to have a whole list of stuff that we want to share with our partner. When we make this appointment, we're going to go one topic, work through that, and then maybe I'll invite them to a dialogue at another time. All right. Make sure you're using I statements. Remember that helps our partner become less guarded. It helps them become less tense and less defensive. So when you know, just make sure you're using those I statements, all right, as opposed to you statements. You don't care about my feelings, you make me feel, or, you know, things like that nature. Okay. Be mindful of your tone and body language. This is so important. You know, you can do all those steps 1 through 5 correctly, but if you have an attitude, if your body language is off-putting, if your tone is aggressive, it's not going to matter. The message is not going to come off well-intended. Okay. So, you know, when we are requesting this appointment, we want to make sure that we're not doing it 5 minutes after we got off work or 5 minutes after a stressful situation. We want to make sure that we're setting up a time where we both can be, you know, relaxed, right? Also be mindful of your word choice. Reinforce your positive behaviors from your partner. That's very important. If they, are, saying things like understand, or they're saying things, I get you. You want to say thank you. I appreciate it. You're really hearing me right now. So things like that. And then end with a thank you, right? You always want to be appreciative. I mean, the idea is really building a healthy culture within your marriage. So once again, I start off by saying that, some of this might seem awkward, right? And we're not taught to communicate like this with each other. So it does seem awkward at first, but the idea is that, you're really being mindful of your setting, you're being mindful of your body, you're being mindful of the words that are coming out of your mouth. You're being really mindful of the message that you're communicating with your partner, okay? Now, the sender, just so you know, if you're the sender, you have the easiest job of the two. The receiver, in my personal and my professional opinion, the receiver has the hardest part. So the first step is for the receiver to listen without interruption. So while the sender is doing all of this talking, the receiver, I want to encourage you, to keep your composure, keep your restraint. Really listen to what your partner is saying, and most importantly, do not interrupt. All right. And it takes a lot of restraint and composure to have the ability to validate and empathize. Those are skills that, they don't come to us naturally. So we have to make sure that we are really being intentional about that. So once again, the flow on the left-hand side will be sent to you as a follow-up. And like I said, when you get it printed out, I always don't feel awkward having sheets of paper in front of you when you're communicating with your partner. You're developing a new culture when you're learning something new. When you're trying out a new recipe, you have the recipe in front of you. So, be compassionate with yourself. You're developing new patterns in your relationship. All right. So start with listening. As your partner speaks, listen without interrupting, and until he or she pauses, and then maybe ask, is it okay for me to talk right now? Or is it okay for me? Is it, are you ready for me to respond? And then when you do respond, the first thing you want to do is mirror what your partner said, make sure that you got it. Like you understood what they said. What I heard you say is, was that right? Did I repeat it back to you right? Did I get the point that you were trying to make? If I didn't get the point you were trying to make, can you help me understand it? Can you clarify or maybe say it differently? I love using the phrase, can you say that in a different way? Oftentimes I don't understand, when I don't understand what people are saying, or maybe what they're asking of me, I'll ask them to say it differently. Okay. The next thing to do is to validate. At the end of the day, all of us just want to be validated in our actions. We want to be validated in what we say to each other. We want to be validated in our relationship by our partner. So validate the content of what your partner is saying. Validation is not about an agreement. It's about letting the other person know that you understand them, that what they're saying makes sense from their point of view. It's not about you. It's not about your opinion. It's about what makes sense for them. None of us are in a position to tell someone else how they should feel, what they should be feeling. That's for them, let them have that. Give them the space and have enough respect for them to feel the way that they need to feel regarding whatever situation. And hopefully that can be reciprocated to you as well. All right. If what your partner is saying doesn't make sense, once again, ask them, help me understand. Could you tell me more about this? Maybe say it differently. And then once again, mirror to make sure you're getting it. All right. And then empathize, have empathy. I can imagine that you might be feeling this. Empathizing means you're trying to imagine what another person is feeling about what they are saying or experiencing. All right. If you have trouble empathizing, try to imagine how it might feel if the tables were turned, or try to recall a time when someone did something to you that was similar to what your partner is describing. All right. Although you may have had a completely different reaction than what your partner has had, or you think you might have had a completely different reaction, it's really besides the point. The fact of the matter is that your partner is feeling this way, and we want to give them the space. We want to be respectful enough to give them the space to allow them to feel this way and let them know that we really hear them. And, you know, their opinion, their words, their feelings have a place in this relationship. Okay. Once again, I want to emphasize that validation does not mean I agree with you. When you're validating someone, it's not about you're right. It's not about I wasn't right, I was wrong. It's about, you know, I hear you. I get it. I understand how you could feel that way. I understand I understand how that can make you feel that way. It may not make me feel that way, but I could understand how it would make you feel that way. All right. All right, so I'm going to pause there. I kind of went through that really quickly. And once again, this is not something that it's not something that comes naturally to us. It takes, when I work with couples, I have them pull out this sheet. First of all, I have them try to bring it to every session, just so, you know, we can make sure that we're practicing this. The idea is to really get it ingrained in ourselves, get it ingrained in our communication to where it's natural. It doesn't feel awkward. I don't want to bust out laughing when I'm doing it. I'm able to take my partner seriously, right? Okay. So, deep breath for me. In summary, you know, we went over the 4 horsemen. We went over the antidotes for that. Once again, you will be getting follow-up resources for those. You'll also be getting resources for the Imago Dialogue. And so I want to leave now some time, the last few minutes here, for questions. If anyone has any questions, feel free to type them in the field. Type them in the chat if you want to. I am happy to answer those. If you need me to go over something again, if you need me to go in more detail about something, I'm happy to do that as well. Just let me know. Can you speak more about the Godwin study? Yeah, I can. So okay, so I have 2 questions there. Can you speak more about the Gottman study? Can you walk through an example of the Imago Dialogue? All right, I can do about what impact do. Ooh, lots of questions. Okay. Okay. Great questions. So I have a friend who's asking me to speak more about the Gottman study. What Gottman did was he set up this house where couples were, they were staying there. So it was a long-term research study. He had couples staying overnight. I don't remember the length of it. And he had cameras set up. He did a couple sessions with them. He did individual sessions with them. And he really got it down to a science and able to predict by studying their behaviors, studying, how they were towards each other. And that's where he developed those 4 horsemen from. And really studying that allowed him to kind of predict which marriages were going to be successful and which weren't. I'm going to encourage you to really get that book. And if you also doing a Google search on Gottman, probably one of the first things that come up will be about his study. Okay. My friend who asked me about that, if I'm happy to go in more detail about that as well. If you want to email me, I'm actually going to put my email address here in the chat. Email everyone. Chat to everyone. All right, because I see a lot of questions coming in, so if I don't get to them all, or if I don't answer your question the way you need me to, feel free to email me and I'll do my best to do that. Okay, so the next question was, can you give an example of the Imago Dialogue? Absolutely. So one of the examples that I like to give is, an example that happened to me and my husband. And so he gets up in the morning and he rushes off to work, doesn't say anything to me, doesn't say I love you, doesn't give me a kiss. That brings up feelings for me. you know, once again, the experiences that we have in our childhood usually mirror how we react to certain situations in our adult life. So for me, that brings up feelings of insecurity, makes me feel like I'm not loved, it makes me feel kind of like he doesn't care about me. And, you know, a lot of emotions might come with that. You know, we might become angry. We might want to, you know, curse at our husband. You don't care about me. You don't give a crap, etc. But instead of doing that, I would encourage, you know, you guys to invite each other to dialogue. So when my husband, maybe when he's on his lunch break, I might, you know, send him a text message or call him, hey, do you have time for a conversation tonight? Or when would you have time? Step one, invite to dialogue. And then the second step would be to, when you guys are sitting down, to state that intention. You know, I really want to have this conversation about something that's, you know, really got to me this morning, and I just want to be heard. I want to make sure that we both walk out of this conversation on the same page. This morning, this morning, I felt like as if that you did not care about me. I felt as if let me go to the dialogue. Sometimes I needed to. Here we go. I felt as if, you know, I just felt like I wasn't cared for. I felt like I wasn't loved. When you know, left hurriedly and you didn't give me a kiss, you didn't, you know, like you typically do. You give me a kiss and you told me I love you, you kind of just rushed out the door. So kind of having, you know, being very intentional, being very open about how it made you feel, and then pausing, all right? And then of course your partner's response. I would want for your partner to respond by mirroring back. So what I'm hearing you say is that when I left this morning for work without kissing you and without saying I love you, it made you feel as if I didn't care about you or that I didn't love you. And I will either say that's correct or clarify that. And then I would want for my partner to validate me. I would want for him to say, I understand how, you know, me rushing out the door without kissing you can make you feel that way. I see how that makes sense to me. And then I would want for him to empathize with me. I can imagine how that would make you feel sad or frustrated or irritated. You know, those weren't my intentions. I was super late, but you know, regardless of that, it wasn't my intentions to make you feel that way. And I'm really sorry that happened. Probably I kind of rushed through that, but you know, hopefully that gives you an idea. Hopefully that was helpful. And once again, it's not something that comes naturally. Oh God, there was a lot more questions. Okay. What impact do phone addictions and social media have on communication issues with couples? I'm assuming this, I don't know what phone addictions, I would need a little bit more clarification on that. But I know in my example, I said, you know, maybe text to ask your partner for dialogue. Actually, I want to take that back. Anytime you're having an important conversation, I would not do it through text. Always verbal, over the phone conversation is best. I don't have enough knowledge to talk about the social media impacts on communication between couples, but I'm happy to, you know, do some research on that and get back to you on that. If you want to email me, if you want to have more of a detailed conversation on that, I'm happy to do that. If your partner asks for separation and isn't communicating with you, what do you recommend to initiate conversation? At that point, I would recommend for the two of you guys to find a safe space within therapy to have a conversation and unpack a little bit more about your partner's request. Okay. What if your partner gets upset each time a traumatic issue between the two of you from the past? It's hard to get out of it, It's hard to get out it without contempt or criticism. It's hard. I'm assuming that you're saying it's hard not to do contempt or criticism when he's stonewalling. When someone is stonewalling, you want to allow them cool off. If he's stonewalling, that means that his emotions are too much for him to deal with. So you want to be respectful of that and give him the break that he needs. But of course, we always want to come back to that when partner has cooled off. And then I would highly encourage you to try some of the antidotes, or really try using that sender flow to communicate, try to communicate what you're feeling when this issue keeps being brought up between the two of you. I hope that's helpful. If it's not, please email me and I can dive in deeper with that for you as well. What if your partner doesn't want to have a two-way conversation? I would encourage you to find a safe space in therapy. When it comes to that part, to the point where your partner doesn't want to talk to you, if your partner is asking for a separation, it's going to be very difficult for you to implement any of these techniques. So I would encourage you at that point to find a safe space in therapy to unpack some of that. For the Imago example, pretend like one person in the relationship is frustrated and the other one is not keeping the house tidy. I'm sorry I didn't use that for my example, but hopefully that's helpful. I'm going to encourage you to bring that up, invite your partner to dialogue when you're not frustrated, and really talk about how it's making you feel. What feelings are coming up for you when they overlook the things around the house, or they're not keeping your space clean. At the end, I don't want to say at the end of the day, it's not about the house being tidy. It might be about feeling disrespected, not something more, it's something deeper than that. So I would want to encourage you to try to get to the root of the feelings, but talk more about the feelings in that situation. Is there a correlation between criticism and disagreeableness as a personality type? I don't have enough information to speak on that. I don't have enough research or knowledge, I should say, to speak on that. I'm sorry. I can, if you want to, once again, guys, if I'm not answering your question to my best ability, feel free to email me, because I want you guys to be able to take something out of this. My partner always stonewalled, but never wanted to go back and address the issue. I always had to bring the issue back up, and it always seemed to start an argument. I ended up just sweeping it under the rug most of the time to avoid the argument. What is a better way to approach this? So I wonder, my first question is to ask you, when we're bringing it up, are we waiting for a point to, where our partner is when both of us are more relaxed, are we being mindful of our tone, of our body language? If you're doing all the things that you need to do as a sender, if your partner is still struggling with that, guys, I really want to encourage you to find a safe space in therapy. Sometimes it's hard to figure out these things on our own, and sometimes it takes a third person, an unbiased person, to bring awareness to something for our partner or for ourselves. Okay? Question, with Imago, let's say you mastered the conflict resolving dialogue, but you keep needing it. What is the long-term process to use what you have validated and empathize with if it still happens, either as? I don't understand that question. Let's say you master a conflict, but you keep needing it. What is it that you keep needing? Do you keep needing to use the Imago therapy? Because that's you're going to always need that. Like, that's a tool that I don't ever want you to lose. I want you to email me. If you can email me and give me a little bit more information about or clarify what you're saying, I would be happy to kind of go over that some more with you. Besides taking a break when flooded, any suggestions if you are aware you stonewalled that can be utilized during the communication to help stay engaged? Don't feel like it's a bad thing to take a break. That's going to be my first recommendation, because that allows you to really be mindful and be intentional with your self-soothing techniques. Sometimes it can be very difficult to self-soothe in front of your partner. All right. And when I think about self-soothing, if I do have to do it in front of someone, or if I do have to do it in front of my partner, it's really hard to do that, because when I self-soothe, I have dialogue in my head. I'm telling myself that it's going to be okay. I'm telling myself, just breathe, and if my partner is talking, I'm not going to be able to tell myself those things. So I want to encourage you to take a break. I want to encourage you to do some relaxation techniques, really try to make your body become intense, really become more aware of the emotions that are going through your body, become aware of where you're feeling those emotions in your body. And if that's too advanced for you, then simply just distract yourself. Distract yourself until the tenseness and the anxiety and the frustration and the anger kind of goes away, until you feel like you can re-engage in that type of dialogue. I hope that's helpful, guys. Can you put the stonewaller in perspective? Example, how soothing is for both partners, not just the stonewaller. If the stonewaller hit, but self-soothed, that would be a bit much for the other partner, I think. So I hope this person is still on. Yes, I don't want to say your name, but I really want you to email me. If you can email me, because you asked me 2 questions that I want to make sure that I'm getting, and I'm actually going to text you privately. I really want you. I would really love to continue this, maybe do a 15-minute, phone call with you to really kind of dive into what you're talking about and some of the concerns that you might be having. Because I don't think, with our time, and you guys are awesome for staying on. It's going past 8. I don't mind giving another 5 to 10 minutes if for those of you guys who still have questions. But my friend who asked about the stonewaller, I'm not quite sure I understand that question. That's why I want you to email me if you're okay with doing that, please. And I just chatted you my email address. Dr. Gottman's experiment is detailed really good in the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. Friend, thank you so much for bringing that up. Thank you. Yes. Matter of fact, Malcolm Gladwell is another really good expert in marital therapy. So if you want to pick up some of his books, that would be good as well. This is a great example. Thank you. I'm so happy to hear that was a great example. I feel like I rushed through that, but that's great. I'm glad you got something out of it. I find myself being contemptuous towards my husband and having a hard time changing that. What do you recommend? I would recommend doing some journaling about that. I would recommend doing some reflection about why, not really the why, but what about him is causing these negative thoughts? Like, what about him is really making you feel that type of energy towards him? Is this something that's been festering for years? Is this something that's festering because of maybe a past behavior? Like, what is happening? Like, I would be curious to know more about what has led to those contemptuous, that contemptuous behavior, because you weren't always that way. You guys had a honeymoon stage. You guys were lovey-dovey at one time. When did you notice that start to change? What was going on during that time? When we're really feeling contemptuous about someone, I really want us to reflect on what is it about them that's really irking us and making us be that, disrespectful and having those bad thoughts about them. My partner gets defensive and tends to ignore me for days. How can I approach him? If I would try to bring awareness to this, once again, the first step is awareness. My friend, are you still on? Yes. Once again, the first step is awareness. If you try to bring awareness to some of your concerns and you've done it long enough to the point where you've realized that your partner is just not going to get it, that's when it's really time to find that safe space, to have that third person really come in and help unpack some of that stuff for us. Because sometimes it's helpful for someone else, to bring awareness to, some of those behaviors. Yeah, he's stonewalling too. If he's ignoring you for days, that's stonewalling as well. This was really beneficial, and I definitely took a number of things away to try. Thank you for hosting this webinar. Good, guys. Thank you. And I forgot to show this page, and I forgot to say, I was supposed to say that there's going to be a survey that's going to be sent to you guys, and so be sure to fill that out. And once again, there's also I'm going to make sure you get those resources. Do you feel like stonewalling is an action that stems from childhood and now used as a coping mechanism? It's definitely a coping mechanism because we're, for whatever reason, we're unable to deal with the flood of emotions that's coming towards us. It could be. I think I really haven't done enough research specifically just on stonewalling to know if it stems from childhood. I would say that probably in a handful of situations, yes. I think most of the 4 horsemen stem from, I would think most behaviors or feelings that we have, and arguments might stem from, how we may have been treated in our childhood, or how things were handled or addressed in our home, how things were communicated to us as a child. So absolutely, I think that can be a reflection of that. Okay, guys, please email me, please reach out to us. You're not in this alone. If you're really feeling like, you're feeling scared to implement some of these antidotes, and you're feeling scared to, try that Imago dialogue with your spouse, you don't have to try it alone. This is something that we are trained in. So please book an appointment with one of our clinicians. We're happy to support you. And you're not in this alone. And be compassionate with yourselves, guys. Be compassionate with yourselves. It's not something that we always have, we don't communicate like this. We don't learn to communicate like this. So, be compassionate with yourself as you're learning to do this. And always remember, it takes 2 to tango. Thank you so much. When will this be up on YouTube? I don't know. I don't know what the turnaround for it is. I would assume it would be up. It takes us a couple of days. I'm sure it takes Marcus a couple of days to edit it. So maybe by Monday, it would be up. Awesome. Would it be possible to send out the handouts beforehand so that we can use it to take notes during your presentation? Yes, I'm gonna make sure that y'all get those handouts tomorrow. I'll do my best to make sure you guys get those tomorrow. All right, any other questions? You guys are awesome. Thank you for staying on. All right, well, it's dinner time for me, and my dogs are outside barking up a storm, and my husband's been out there with them to keep them busy for this past hour. So I'm gonna hop off. I appreciate you guys. This was a great turnout. I hope this was helpful. Please reach out. My email address is in there. Reach out if you need me. I'm happy to explore some more of these questions that you might have about this session. Okay, thank you. No, thank you guys. You guys were a great audience. I appreciate the participation and the questions at the end. They're very nice. Awesome.